Hi, I'm John Atack,
I'm Ursula Wake.
and this is Lyrical Wax. And we're going to read from a little book, What I Wrote. We've got 2 copies of it, just to make sure. Spike will do the thing where it zooms forward. I'm not looking. Which is a translation of the Dao De Jing by Lao Tsu. Lao Tsu is a figure more of myth than substance. Said to have been a librarian, possibly in the 4th century BC, that is in the 300s BC, before Christ, or before Christian era, if you prefer. He was, and as an old man, he was leaving China, and gatekeeper locked him in a room and said, "Until you've written down your wisdom, I'm not going to let you go." And that's how keen he was to share what he knew. So he wrote 81 chapters, they're called, or verses, in a poetic form. And it's the form that much ancient wisdom takes, perhaps because it's easier to remember things that are written in poetic form, particularly things that rhyme, which in this case it doesn't. These have been handed down. This is one of the 3 strands of Chinese thinking, along with Confucianism and Buddhism, which was imported. You also have Moism and Mencius, who comes out of Confucius, but we're not going to talk about that. Oh, I just did. I first met this work when I was 17. My girlfriend's mother's boyfriend had left a copy lying around, and I picked it up, I read it straight through, and was completely intrigued that somebody this long ago was not really talking about gods and spirits and demons and supernatural things, but was trying to create a rational philosophy of the world and where it came from and what it was. So, did you want to ask me something? You've got some little questions written down. Honest.
That I was supposed to come in with a bit more quickly. So, yeah, because what I've been intrigued by is why, because I remember you telling me that you read loads of different translations of this, and so I'd wondered why you wanted to do your own rendition of it.
Well, this is the second time. Over the years, it's intrigued me. I've read about 60 translations. It is the second most translated book in the world after the Bible.
Wow.
And eventually I found Jonathan Starr's version, and Jonathan Starr in great detail goes through the meanings of every character as you go through the work. So I looked at all those things. I was familiar with the basic ideas, having read 60 versions of it and tens of commentaries upon it. I would recommend Angus Graham and Feng Yulan as the great scholars in the West and the East on this subject, and eminently readable as well. And there are many, many other great, Max Kaltenbach's very good. There are many other good texts. And what's being put forward is a way of looking at life. It's not a religion. It became a religion. It became what is called Husian Taoism, or alchemical Taoism, where the aim is to understand a secret meaning within this text and the Jiangsu. There are only the 2 texts, principal texts, that is about living forever, or at least living for hundreds of years, and there are all sorts of claims. In the West, what is called Jianglao Taoism, Jiangsu, Lao Tsu, has come up, and this is also known as philosophical Taoism, where one is seeking to understand the principles and apply them to life. I suppose the easiest way to express it is to say that it's a happy form of Stoicism, sort of like Epictetus among the Greeks. If you take Epictetus and Epicurus, the Epis, and put them together, then you get this, not the miserable Stoicism of Marcus Aurelius, where, you just got to put up with it, the shit happens philosophy. And there's an illustration that you'll find very often in Chinese texts of a vinegar barrel with the Buddha, Confucius, Zhongzi, and Lao Tsu standing at the barrel, and Confucius is pulling a face at the taste of the vinegar. The Buddha is smiling serenely, or whatever that face is. And Lao Tsu is grinning at the taste of the vinegar. And I think this is the attitude to life, and perhaps what's always kept me fascinated. I don't consider myself to be religious, and haven't done since I was a teenager. So around about 2005, 2006, I finished this version and then waited another dozen years to publish it, having been through it very carefully to try and understand the concepts that were being explained within it. And the poetic form as well. It felt to me that none of the versions that I'd read really got to the heart of the text, because many of them had all sorts of Chinese allusions in, like straw dogs and paper tigers and things like that, which are not really used in Western parlance. And some of them were just clumsy. Many of them were trying to prove the point of the author. So there's a version, for example, by a Christian minister, which is trying to push that way. There are versions by Tai Chi masters. And although Tai Chi Chuan, there are claims that it goes back into the ancient myths of history, it probably doesn't. And they've taken the thing and said, oh, he's talking about breathing here. Well, there is, in fact, a line in it that to control the breath is merely violence, which seems to go totally against this idea of a system like Tai Chi Chuan where you are controlling the breath. So
Okay.
I don't think he was talking about that.
Mm. So you were wanting to put it in, let me start that again. So it sounds like what you're saying is you wanted to put it in comprehensible as well as poetic language.
Yes.
Something that was immediately accessible, is that right?
Yeah, and let me say that,
okay.
that I think poetic and comprehensible are two things that should go together, even though as poets we're allowed to use complicated and obscure words. The thing is to say something as precisely as possible and so that it can be understood. And I think all too often poetry is taught as being something that you can't understand or that's boring.
Now, one thing I've noticed as a difference between your rendition, which I do think is really poetic and really clear, really easy to read. I really enjoy Jon's version. But one thing that I've noticed is that some things you leave, so for example, the word Tao, the very first word of the whole thing, you leave as those words and other people have translated them. So what was the reason for you leaving? There's just a handful of words, aren't there?
I think it's because, for example, Arthur Waley translated the book as The Way and Its Power, using the word Dao to mean the way and De to mean power. And it seems to me that the book itself is introducing these words to explain them. And if you say, I don't know how the universe began, it must have begun somehow, I'll call that thing Tao. To then call it the way seems to be pushing forward. There also, De is always translated in English as power or virtue. And I think it's a combination of the two things. That it's not like a power that you have or a moral virtue that you have. So the story is told by Lao Tsu, the other great teacher of the Taoist lineage, that as a butcher who says, when you start learning butchery, you will have to sharpen your knife after every beast you cut. After a while, you'll only have to sharpen your knife once a week and then once a month. And he said, I never have to sharpen my knife. And that's because I go with the flow. I know what to anticipate. And I think this is true of any skill, the 10,000 hours it takes to become an expert at anything, or the 10 years or what have you, that you do start doing things as second nature. You don't have to think about it anymore. I think it's a major problem with our educational systems. They make you so anxious that you do think about things all the time. So if I go 7 times 7 is 49, normally I will now check before I'll do 7 times 8 to check to make sure that, because I had teachers standing behind me who were making me feel anxious. So I think you have to lose any anxiety and help people to lose that to achieve a mastery. And that is Do. that is the virtue, that is the power of skill,
Okay.
and also of living in the world,
Mm.
and dealing with other people and growing up. And
It's a really interesting thing to have a very specific word for that, virtue and power, because without explanation, I can understand how those two words come together, and we don't have a single word for it in English in
No.
current usage anyway. And it's so it's a very interesting thing to have as an important concept.
And sometimes there'll be words that I translate differently. So the word tien, which is usually rendered T-I''E-N, tien, I've never seen a translation into English that doesn't say that means heaven. The problem is that heaven, to somebody brought up in a Western Christian culture, is a place with harps and angels where you go after you die, whereas tien is actually the natural order of things.
Ah, it's very different.
The way of heaven. So the Chinese emperor would move through 4 palaces according to the season, and it was thought that disharmony, if the crops failed, then this was because something had gone wrong in placating the order of heaven or following the order of heaven. So I translate tien as nature, as in the nature of things, the natural way of doing things, which is a very strong idea in Taoism, that we should follow the grain, which is li in Chinese, Li, and is spoken of with jade, the most precious thing to Chinese, more so beyond diamonds or gold, and that a jade cutter has to be able to know where to strike the jade so that it will open out, break in along the line, and you can ruin a very valuable piece of jade by hitting it the wrong way. So again, the notion of de, the virtual power, fits together with the notion of li, finding the way, the natural way of something, which fits in again with the idea of tien, which is how a thing is best done. And so we find somebody who has mastery of something, they're very calm, they're very easy about what they do, they will tap the piece of jade in the right place, and then you see a novice coming along and just how much time it will take to be at ease with doing that. And it does seem almost supernatural when you see somebody astonishingly skilled. You see a guitar player who can, like John McLaughlin or Segovia or Jimi Hendrix, with a remarkable skill. But to them that has become easy and natural because they're not creating obstacles and they're not putting anything of themselves in the way of what they're doing.
Yeah. The dirt of Jimi Hendrix.
That's
I've
it.
not thought of that.
Which my son Dan is close to achieving, it would seem.
Bless him.
Age 16. So we're going to read this out, and in some places I've added a little commentary, which is very evident in the book itself.
Can I just say, so we're going to read the first 6 chapters rather than the whole thing?
We will, at this point. If you give us money, we'll read the rest. So what will happen is that I will read the text, and when we come to a piece of commentary, which only happens in some of them, then Ursula will read out the commentary, and then I will return to text. So you know that what I read is what Lao Tsu wrote, what Ursula reads is what I wrote. So,
so an added, almost like a footnote, but it works better embedded in the text. Yeah,
I felt rather than putting things down at the bottom of the page or the end of the book and making life difficult for everyone.
And reading it through, it makes a lot of sense, and I think it does flow better than if it were to be footnotes, which has a unpoetic, scholarly thing that you were trying to avoid. I believe.
Yeah, I want it to be simpler. I want, and again, particularly with this, I did avoid any obscure or arcane words because I wanted just about anybody who could read to be able to understand it, because that way it might be useful. But the thing was to maintain the poetic sense of it, so the words, communicate directly in that way.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is chapter 1. Tao cannot be This is not chapter 1. Let's start again. This is chapter 1. Tao cannot be caught in words. No name can describe it. Although it is beyond names, everything nameable is contained within Tao. From the nameless Tao, the nameable universe emerges. But naming the source of the universe brings us no nearer to its comprehension. Universe is just a label for the mother of everything. Tao is a name for the nameless.
Trying to map a route to Tao is like painting on water. Each individual's path to the Tao is unique. Escape the ruts of routine, the constant circuit of desire. Stop distracting yourself from your true nature.
Escape desire and you will experience inexplicable marvels.
Even if you exhaust your craving, it will never complete you. You must abandon desire to realize that you are already complete.
Chasing your cravings, you will never reach beyond the surface. Beneath desire is the Tao, but the Tao is also inside desire. Desire and its absence unite in Tao, like the opposed sides of a coin, differing only in name. The opposites are hard to understand. To comprehend their fundamental unity is the threshold of the comprehension of the incomprehensible essence of the origin of all origins.
This is chapter 2. I'm going to read this. We distinguish beauty by contrast with ugliness. We are capable of attraction because we are capable of repulsion. Attraction and repulsion are poles of the same reaction. They arise from the same source. The same is true of our sense of good and evil. So it is that being and non-being and life and death originate together and remain interdependent. Difficult and easy complement each other. Long and short are relative to each other. The higher and the lower can only exist mutually. Treble and bass harmonize each other. Before and behind exist only in continuum. So the sage lives every day without extraneous effort, in harmony with the natural flow of events, and teaches without explanations. The sage lets nature take its course, turning nothing away, not seeking reward or gratitude. The sage gives benefit only for the sake of benefit, without wanting to possess or control anything. The sage accomplishes, but subtracts none of the merit from his work. He knows that he is simply a channel through which the work flowed. Because the sage never identifies himself with the work, nothing is lost, so his achievement can last forever.
And on to chapter 3, which again has a commentary within it, which Ursula will read. If you single out talented people for praise, you will cause jealousy and stir up contest.
This will divide people against each other. Encourage cooperation rather than competition. Prize everyone equally.
The greater the value placed on worldly goods, the more likely they will attract thieves. Obsession with cost and ostentatious display remind people of their relative poverty, causing dissatisfaction and anxiety.
The measure of wealth, I'll start that again. The measure of wealth is in harmony and satisfaction, not in the rarity of objects.
Empty nonsense from the mind and fill bellies with nutritious food. Quieten willfulness and calm emotions, strengthen bones.
And cultivate good health.
Align individuals' ambitions with social needs. Innocent of jealousy, competition and desire, who can trick people into destructive behaviour? Act with the least effort, then everything will be in harmony with its own nature.
Chapter 4. Although Tao is empty, it is inexhaustible. It is deeper than the depths. It initiated all causes. It is the prime mover. Tao smooths jagged edges and resolves discord, unravels confusion and entanglement, softens even blinding glare. Tao is a tranquil ocean that permeates all form and embraces the limits of time. I do not know how Tao came into being. It seems to be the origin of everything.
And on to chapter 5, which again has some commentary in it. Chapter 5. Nature is impartial. It has no feelings and makes no judgments, so can have no preferences, nor any sense of fairness.
These are human characteristics.
The sage is impartial and not swayed by sentiment, so treats everyone with the same benevolence,
regardless of class, creed, gender, race, status, celebrity, or any other determining feature.
To the sage, everyone is equally worthy of care and concern. Nature is like a bellows, which from its very emptiness pumps out energy. Nature is like the hollow core of a flute, which from its very emptiness resonates with music. Nature seems to continue endlessly, yet the more it exerts itself, the stronger it becomes. Too many words lead only to exhaustion, distracting the listener from stillness, and disrupting his equanimity.
And finally, chapter 6. Only through stillness can the mysteries of nature be perceived, by deep concentration and tranquil observation. Out of stillness, the endless thread of the universe is spun. Only through stillness can you travel to the gateway of creation. Only from stillness can energy emerge. All motion comes from the motionless. The ancients spoke of the spirit of the valley, the mother goddess, who provides for all ceaselessly, yet never changes.
And on that note, there is this idea that scientific observation was possible within Buddhism and Taoism because there was, and indeed within Islam, because there was no restriction upon what you were meant to believe or whether you were meant to investigate. And I think Christianity terribly hampered scientific investigation. That came to an end, and some profoundly believing Christians like Galileo, Newton, Faraday were the founders of modern science. So I don't take a science versus religion view. The point is that this teaching is an inquiry, and where it's taken to be a set of rules that you have to follow, it can become quite dangerous and strange. But where it's taken as something to think about, as a sort of intellectual adventure, I think it can become a very useful way of looking at the world. It's certainly a very positive way of looking at the world, I've found, for a lifetime.
Yeah, positive. And yeah, like you say, it's about inquiry, it's about an intellectual adventure is a great phrase, I think, for what it is. So rather than a list of rules, a list of commandments. Yeah.
So
thanks very much.
Thank you very much. So there we are. It's this, and rush out and buy 10 copies immediately.
And where is it available from, John?
It's available from all good bookstores. It's certainly available on Amazon, and I too have reservations about Amazon's business practices, but they make things available to us. They make it easy to publish. It's also available as an ebook, and when we're done, it will be available as an audiobook as well in a short period of time, we hope. So thank you very much. This has been Lyrical Wax. I'm John Atack.
I'm Ursula Wake. Thank you for watching.